Okay, welcome back everyone. New time, new starting day for me. My family schedule adjusted, and so I switched my streaming day. So hopefully people caught the notifications. I tried to post it out as soon as I knew 4 or 5 days ago. But at least going forward, my schedule on Twitch has been updated. This is going to be the current streaming night. So for those watching on YouTube, it's Wednesday evening for me. For people around the world, adjust accordingly. Okay, so let's dive in. A couple things to chat about to start. As I find my buttons. Okay, first of all, Hacktoberfest is coming again. I know I usually talk it up every year. This is an awesome time. It's all about getting people interested in helping out with open source projects. So the very fact that you're theoretically in watching this stream, I do a ton of open source work on here, working on various projects. So if you are interested and are wanting to get involved and not sure where to help out, Hacktoberfest is a great way to find projects that you're interested in. Poke around, look at either languages or frameworks that you're interested in, look for the different libraries, and if you do enough pull requests, you end up getting a t-shirt at the end of it. So very much recommended. What's up, Robert? I teased this one out like, I don't know, 3 or 4 weeks ago. I was on the Adventures in .NET podcast a while back, and it just came out. When did this come out? Let's see, this says 8:37 p.m. my time, so about 20 minutes ago this one dropped. So Adventures in .NET podcast, was very fortunate to be able to be on there and have a good conversation with those guys. So if you're interested, if you're watching this stream, you probably already know I love WPF, but if you'd like to hear more about it, it was a really fun time. It's a great podcast in general. They have a lot of very interesting guests talking about, as you might imagine, all things .NET. Okay, one more thing I want to point out. So mindless self-promotion. So one of my coworkers, Meg, wrote this awesome article. So I've done several streams in the past, specifically the ones on... Should have had these open. 1 second. Hold that thought. Switching. I can do this. That's the wrong window. That's my OBS window. Let's try again. Whoom, there we go. Okay, see? Not as bad as I look. Let's see. Generic host. So specifically ones around like WPF, generic host. I pointed out this iConfiguration key vault one here as well. I'll just drop both of these in if anybody is interested in checking these ones out. These ones are fairly good for... Gotta mute myself so I don't have to listen to myself talk. These are great ones in terms of getting started with WPF, dependency injection, the generic host, which is, for people familiar with like ASP.NET Core, it's effectively bringing that into your WPF world. This article from Meg here is all about plugging in Key Vault as a backing store for your iConfiguration. So ways of being able to keep out your secrets from littering your code. She does it from an ASP.NET Core perspective, but if you take a look at like the generic host video, this could be applied anywhere where the generic host is. So definitely highly recommended. This one was very well done. Very much enjoyed that. And this one just came out earlier today, I believe. So we should try to get you on .NET Rocks. .NET Rocks, if you're interested. All links down there. Get in contact. Happy to. Okay. So I was going back to some work that I had started on previously. And ideally, I had started down and we did a quick port of Cloud.Squirrel because I was working on my Scuraday project, ran into some stuff and was like, oh, let's check out the V3 stuff. It looked cool. Started plugging it in, found some stuff, and then opened it up and saw some of the command line parsing and went, ugh. Partly because it was on mono options, and mono options is great, but it lacks some features that you kind of, like some users start to expect from more advanced command line applications. Like context-sensitive help, like you get in the .NET CLI, is kind of one of those things that people start to expect. So system command line, for people who are not familiar with it, let's see. I'll just drop this. So this is a library I've been involved in quite a bit. As you can see, I do a little bit of contributing. And you can pull it in as a NuGet package. You do need to turn on preview NuGet packages. It is not as a full release yet. But it gives you a ton of features. There's documentation on docs.microsoft. You can see it's actually from, it's underneath the .NET org from Microsoft. John has been one of the principal developers leading the charge on it. This is an awesome library for building command line apps. So I started in on converting Cloud.Squirrel to system command line. And just to be clear up front, I did post an issue here, and Casey, I may be butchering that name, did get back chatting about it, and then he got in contact with me over Discord, and we went back and forth chatting about it more, and he was happy to entertain a pull request. But he was also hoping to see this thing get completed in a timely manner, because he's got some stuff that is waiting on adding additional command line arguments. So was hoping to get this done somewhat quickly. Quick sidetrack because I forgot about it. Material design in XAML, there is going to be a 4.6.1 release, probably kicked out soon. I had intended to do it earlier this week, but ran into some issues after updating dependencies. And I could have rolled back the dependencies, but decided to actually fix those and then roll the release. So I think I got all of those things squared away earlier tonight. As long as the builds flow nicely tonight, I will probably kick a 4.6.1 release of material design fairly quickly. There's not a lot that's going to change for the NuGet package itself. A lot of it's around the demo app. There's a couple fixes in there for like the new reveal style for a password box. It's going to be it's a point release, so it's bug fixes primarily are what are going in there, and then the big change is fixing that scroll viewer stuff for the demo app. That was a lot of talking. That was way too much talking. Okay, Cloud.Squirrel. Let's take a look at this. I am on my thing. I have it open. Okay. And I installed an update. And I'm hoping this is big enough. I installed an update and it reset my font sizes, and I was very annoyed. Robert, are you still there? Is that a visible enough font, or does it need to go bigger? The problem is I didn't have my font settings backed up, and when they got cleared, I lost them, and I was very annoyed. Okay, let's take a look. So, a couple things really quick just to go through and call out how this project is laid out. With the way Squirrel works, there is multiple invocations of this. So there is CSQ.exe that gets built. There is update.exe. And then there's the actual Squirrel library itself. So what ends up happening is the update.exe is the one that is responsible for actually performing the update. Now, the request was, so I converted over the OS X one because this is new with the V3 stuff. OS X is previously not a supported thing. The update.windows, Casey had asked that I leave this one untouched, just because this one is potentially breaking. And so rather than risking breaking people who are upgrading into V3, this one was requested to stay there. So we're going to go hands off on this one for now. The Squirrel command line one is the primary one, and I think it's fairly close. And then Squirrel tool is a is a .NET global tool that's just csq.exe, and its entire purpose in life is to find your installed version of Squirrel command line and just forward onto it. So initially when we had done this, I don't know, a couple streams ago, I'd plugged this in, and it was really easy to go through and do a root command with some options and all of that stuff, which was fine, except for the feedback that I got was, okay, this is great, except for things like help on this tool shouldn't show this tool's help per se. It should show the help from the downstream tool that it's invoking. So effectively, not necessarily giving back this version. Now, I think we can probably do better without any breaking changes, because this is also a newish tool as well for doing this work. So I think that's probably where we're going to go. The other thing that I slapped in here is I started writing tests. And specifically, I wrote a couple tests here just preemptively because I was doing some custom parsing. And I wanted to be able to test it. And this is one of the best things about System.CommandLine. It's built for testing. If you look at the tests on the System.CommandLine library, there are tons of tests. John has a general principle that if you make a change and all the tests pass, it couldn't have been that bad of a change. And especially as we've done like performance work and various things, we've gotten lots of feedback that, hey, it's really great that you have this awesome suite of tests, because I can make little performance tweaks and then validate I didn't break anything by just rerunning all the tests, which is awesome. So that has been a wonderful thing. So I built up just a little bit here. In terms of structuring this, I've gone back and forth on how to actually deal with this. But what I ended up doing is on these commands, so for example, if we look at the Windows commands, there's pack and releaseify. And so you'll note here, I elected to actually make my own strongly typed command objects that follow a similar object hierarchy to these option classes. And these option classes were previously used with mono options. After all of my changes here, these option classes are just straight POCOs. And these properties probably could and should get renamed at a later point, but they were named this way because of how mono options parses and builds up its command line from this. And System.CommandLine doesn't do that. It separates out the, it doesn't rely on reflection to do its work. So you can have your properties named something that makes sense for that, and then still have a nice API for your command line interface. So for example, things like -x, --xplat versus something that automatically picks it up. So for what it's worth, I elected to go with strongly typed commands just so that it's fairly obvious where all of this stuff goes, and then it makes it fairly easy. All of these commands have some shared options, and because the commands all have to be executed, they all contain a set handler method, and I just put the execute method directly inside of the command itself. It could be anywhere. This just takes an arbitrary delegate. But then it allowed me to have my execute method be fairly simple, where my execute method is instantiate an options class, call the set options values, and this allows me to, because I have a command hierarchy, so that commands that need to share options can derive from the same thing. That way I don't have to do all of this stuff multiple times. It allows me to just call set option values, walk through the hierarchy. This thing is literally just assigning properties values on the POCO. It's also worth noting System.CommandLine has some strongly typed stuff, like for example, this package option is of type file info. So even though on the command line you type in a string, System.CommandLine, if you tell it, hey, no, the type of this is file info, it'll actually do that conversion for you. Especially for command lines, passing things like file info, directory info, URIs, those types of things are fairly universal and obvious of what you want to happen. But then it means that you don't have to worry as much about, did the user pass me a valid string, or did I need to make sure that they only passed me existing file? And then you'll note here, I've also tied in some additional system command line extensions. So this is all around custom validation. Now, some of the validation with system command line, oops, I did not save my spot. That was the release command, I believe it was. No, releaseify, where was I? This one. There we go. The existing only, this is something built into system command line. But this requires extension. This was something I added myself. And so you can tie in this extra validation such that if you know before your command is executed, you want a particular amount of validation on your CLI, ideally, you do that validation up front as part of parsing that CLI rather than doing it on the back end after the command's being invoked. By doing it there, it allows system command line to then be intelligent and say, oh, hang on, the user messed up. Let me give them a useful message about what's wrong, and then, show them that context sensitive help for, what the CLI is supposed to look like. So I built all of these up. Some of these may be nice at some point to move somewhere else, but some are fairly specific. I actually contemplated building a NuGet package which with just a bunch of these validators because I was starting to realize, yeah, I kind of need these in a bunch of different places. But some of these are very specific to this particular library. Like, for example, requires valid NuGet ID. Well, ultimately, the implementation of this is something over in Squirrel, where there's a regular expression to say, hey, is this thing a valid NuGet ID? Yes or no? Great. Right. I added the validation in just so it all parses. Okay. So I think in terms of a lot of this, it is probably pretty close. The only thing that I did, and I probably need to double check it with Casey to make sure he's okay with it, is I did, rather than having everything flat, because the previous Squirrel EXE, all of these commands were just at the root level. There wasn't this hierarchy of them. Whereas this one now, let me pull it up. I suppose testing this is good, right? Let's see. Oh, let's go in here. And then cd source Squirrel command line. There we go. .NET run. So if we do -- help. So people who haven't seen this before, if you do a double -- at the end of your .NET run, it just tells .NET run everything after this double -- is something to pass to my app, not something to pass back. And we can see here we've got no reference exceptions and various things in here, which is not horribly surprising. Let's just start hammering through some of these issues because I'd like to kind of be able to provide screenshots. I also want to build some unit tests up around all of these because that will be important. So let's see, where are we? So release command 61, let's just dive in here. Release command 61. Yep, that's just a straight bug. Try again. At command 24. 24. Sorry, what is your issue here? Object reference, no reference. Line 24. Oh, it's because pack ID isn't defined yet? Oh, look at that. Okay, so we got to do... Because this one's referencing it by name, that thing needs to be defined first, so not overly shocking. There we go. Okay, so here's some of the subtle changes that are going on here. So first of all, you can see it allows you to specify your platform, and this is actually kind of a weird way of building things up because there's sort of a two-pass command line thing. But then we've got pack, releaseify, and deployment. Deployment probably could use a description on there. And this is where I don't know if this, and maybe I should post this out to see. Commands for deploying Squirrel releases. Yeah, we'll do that. Now if we do this, and then if we look at deployment, so this is what I mean when I say context sensitive help, because right there I said, okay, give me help at the top level, and now I want to get help down at a lower level. Let's see. But you have to spell. Did you mean deployment? Yes, I did. Thank you. I can't spell. There we go. So you'll see here, S3 and GitHub don't have descriptions on them, so we should probably do that. Those are going to be up here, S3 commands. So this guy's lacking a description. Let's see, what are the descriptions on the base commands? Those are probably more helpful. Let's see, or download three. Because these didn't exist before, it's kind of hard to decide what the actual things need to be. Let's do the same thing for GitHub. GitHub. Do that. Okay. There's that. I do wonder if we want to change this up so it's not Squirrel command line. We'll see. We'll see. That could be an outstanding question. Okay, so let's just check the next one. So deployment, if we do HTTP down, I'm somewhat tempted to move HTTP down into, because for example, if I do S3, you'll note S3 has both up and down. And maybe I should change the S3 one to be S3 API. That matches that. And if I do GitHub, yeah, so let's change this one up a little bit, because this other one I did something more akin to this. Obviously with HTTP that's not really possible. Let's see. Let's see, and we want to do we're gonna go with download. What did we do on the other ones? Download from HTTP. Then we're going to do this. And then, just to make these things match, this was base, but I don't need a base. So it'll be HTTP download command. Let's see, so we'll do a rename. HTTP download command. Also, for those people who haven't seen this dialog, I am on the preview of Visual Studio. I'm on the fence. I think I like it. And then this one's going to just be down to be on parity with the other ones. And that'll probably look a little better. So now if we come over here, we can come here and check. We look at deployment. It should, rather than showing HTTP. Oh, that just says down. Oops. What? Oh, the Clowd.Squirrel host here needs to point at not this anymore, but HTTP command. There. Doesn't use the right command, it won't actually propagate it. Okay. Now if I do that, that comes through a little bit better. And now we get all of the stuffs. Q. Q, Q, Q. I like it, I like it, I like it, I like it, I like it. Okay. So I do want to end up making these tests to make sure everything parses appropriately and all of that is checked. But I think what I'd like to look at next is, let's quickly make a commit. 16 errors with hands, and let's I want to do one other thing too real quick, is I want to test the let's see, OSX. I want to just test the OSX commands. So the previous commands for releaseify, those are all Windows specific commands. You'll note the releaseify command doesn't exist on the OSX side, but it does contain pack. Let's see here. This one here, package content. This one needs a better display name. So let's come in here. That one was more of a fancy one. Where is package content? Package title, bundle. Oh yeah, this one. Yeah, this is the reason I wrote tests. This one has custom validation. It's limited to a specific set of keys. And I think what we're gonna do here, let's see, there's that. I think we're just gonna go, I think I'm gonna go actually after all of this. How about, content dot, come on. Oh, I need to remember the Copilot has been impressing me. And it's control shift. I need to remember the keyboard commands. Hang on. Trigger inline suggestion. Control alt back. So must be out of its bind. Okay, fine. What we're looking for is argument help name. And then I'm trying to think. I think we almost want this to read as name equals file. I almost think that's what I want it to look like, but I'm not sure because it's going to wrap it in the because it's specifically on this parsing. What are we looking at? Great question. So this is the Clowd.Squirrel library. Drop a link. And we are porting its command line parsing over to the System.CommandLine library. So this particular option, when you do when you execute pack, you can do -- pkg content, and the help is also a little ambiguous, but the expectation is that you'll do something like pack, and then it'll be pkg content, and then it's like readme equals, my readme file text. I don't know enough about the structure of these OS X installers to know exactly what the file is, but it's something akin to this. And then more importantly, you can specify this multiple times over, which is great. I'm just trying to figure out how that needs to appear here in order to not look weird. I wonder if rather than name, I should just put key. And it's very limited. Like the only options available for the key are welcome, readme, license, conclusion. That's it. I'm gonna put a question. Is this a reasonable way to describe this option to a user? Because I honestly don't know. Okay, so there. Other than that, I think most of these are displaying roughly what I would do. Just got out of a React.js Node.js bootcamp back in January and started my first job in April, which was in C#, ASP.NET MVC. Cool. When you say ASP.NET MVC, which version of the framework are you targeting? Is it like latest, greatest C# 6 stuff, or are you doing something a little bit older? Current. Ooh, that is fun. That is a lot of fun. I do enjoy some good MVC. They're updating to current. Excellent. That's always good to hear. Microsoft is starting to push people to try to stay up to date on latest frameworks, and they're making it so that it's not painful. Fun but annoying as hell. I can believe that. The interesting part with MVC is some of it comes from historical ways that things were done. There's a lot of convention-based stuff that can sometimes be interesting. Version control is not something I learned in bootcamp. Oh, interesting. That's actually, so version control is one of those things that me and several colleagues have taught at a local university. And one of the things that we always make sure to teach the students is Git source control. Like that is literally week 1 is what we teach them. Because we expect for all of our homework assignments, we tell our students, yeah, we're going to do this with industry tools. Buckle up. We aren't going to use whatever you've been using, at the university. We're actually going to use real industry tools for doing it. I assume you guys are probably using Git version control via DevOps. I assume that's probably Azure DevOps. Touched Azure or C#, yeah. It is. I will say this: it can be a decent learning curve, but I think it is worth it. We're using TFS for this project. I'm sorry. TFS isn't horrible, but as somebody who uses Git day in and day out, TFS shows its age at times. Especially with some of the speed with like with Git branching being so simple and fast, TFS makes you leaves me wanting what I can't have. But that's cool that at least the company is trying to update. That is a good sign. Companies that don't want to update and expect to just keep using the old tech forever that's a red flag for me. So at least the company should at least have plans of upgrading and act on those at some point rather than say nah. Like that's always a bad idea. Especially with the newer what used to be called .NET Core and is now just called .NET, because that won't confuse anybody. The release cadence being as quick as it is with a new version every year and an LTS only every other year, it means that companies really are somewhat being forced into saying, yeah, you're going to be updating your stuff at least every few years. Like, you need to plan on a good release cadence. It's a private consulting firm. Well, that's cool. So the company I work for is also a... Here, shameless self-promotion. The company I work for is also a... I think the official term is professional services company. It's a consulting firm. That's primarily what we do, is a lot of training. We've got a couple in-house projects. We've got customers kind of all over, and people spread across a bunch of different projects. Sometimes we get called in early enough where people are like, hey, we want to build this thing right. Will you help us? It's like, yes, thank you. We would love to help you build it right. And then other times people call us and go, yeah, so we're in a hole and we need someone to dig us out. Those are less fun projects. So, but it varies. I will say I like the consulting firm style because it means that you are never bored. I always, or prior to this job, I would usually get bored around the 3 to 4 year mark, because it doesn't matter how cool a project is. Usually after 3 or 4 years, I'm probably bored of it and I want something else. And at a consulting firm, there is no end of projects. If you want something different, you will have something different. Which is cool. And thanks for the follow too. I appreciate it. Okay. I wanted to go through and get the squirrel tool forwarding, because this is going to be the more interesting one, I think. Because this one can't work the way that a normal command line app would go. So, and I'm trying to find where this is. Main inner. Okay. So this little guy here is just a very simple CLI. It has 3 options, and one of them is just literally turning a verbose flag on or off. All of the code in here just is pulling this out, and then the rest of this I haven't really touched. At least I don't hope I didn't. This being my first gig, I'm just lost most of the time. I've never seen C#. Just give my login, controls, and bitwarden keys, told to install Visual Studio Code, go watch someone walk through a bug fix, and then turn loose. Oh boy, that is very exciting. If you're looking to pick up C#, one, shameless self-promotion. I've got a bunch of C# content on my... Yeah, that's also one of my pet peeves, is I try to make sure that none of my colleagues get put on islands on projects by themselves. Everybody needs pairs. It gets hard when you're by yourself all the time. But if you are interested, I do have a bunch of YouTube content around C#. And I'm hoping before the end of the year to actually start putting out some C# or some YouTube specific content around learning the C# language. Okay, small spoiler. So there is a book, this one here, called Essential C#. Mark Michaelis, the author, is my boss. That's me. I'm one of the technical editors. So yeah, heavily biased. And you'll note this is still targeting C# 8. So this is now back a couple versions. But at least, so this is oftentimes when we have taught at university what we try to teach people for doing C#. And I was wanting to go through and start putting together smaller video series, because this book and the contents are really dense. Like, there's a lot there, and sometimes it's easy to miss stuff. And I wanted to go through. It's kind of a weird book too, in that it targets somebody with little to no programming knowledge. So people with a lot of experience can sometimes feel like things go too slow, and people who don't have a lot of experience feel like it goes too fast. And it tries to fit in that middle ground, and so it sometimes means no one's happy. But I wanted to do some shorter videos kind of going through the same type of content of learning the language, just to give people a way of coming up to speed on C#, but then have it be small targeted sections so that if you wanted to learn one specific thing, you could go through and do that. Learn Python, then JavaScript, 2 weeks studying C# for the job. Getting used to not having dynamic typing was the biggest hurdle. Yeah, there is a lot of similarities in programming languages. It's almost to the point that as long as you're picking one of the mainstream languages, you probably aren't going to be too bad off. Now, I'm very biased towards C#, so that's heavily my bias. I've spent a lot of time learning the language, the syntax, and the intricacies of it. So it's easy for me to say C# is best. But there are plenty of reasonable language choices that are out there. But it really should be one of any language should be one of the mainstream ones that's actively getting updates. I'll just say that. If you're on a language that's not actively getting updates, you might consider switching. Because all of what I would call the reasonable languages are ones that are under active development, getting updates, getting improvements, advancing, getting better tooling, that kind of thing. But yeah, a lot of the programming concepts flow between all of them as well. I will say this, just your comment on dynamic typing, C# technically does have a dynamic type. I would discourage its use in most cases. So C# is one of those weird languages where you can kind of make it behave the way you want it to. You just probably shouldn't. So it's one of those, just because you can doesn't mean you should. So don't do that. Okay, so I want to figure out this whole thing here. All of this code all comes down to this run squirrel call. Where is it? Blah, blah, blah. Where are you? Where are you? It's a local function. That's why I missed it. Yeah, see, this is another good example. C# you can just nest your functions. Why? Because while I miss dynamic typing, I see the value in it. It does help keep careless mistakes. Yeah, and I will say that is one of the things with the .NET ecosystem that I absolutely love. The tooling is exceptional. Like, VS Code and Visual Studio are both very good IDEs. And even beyond that, you've got like JetBrains with things like Writer that are really good third-party IDEs. So even if you don't like the first-party stuff, there's at least competition in that space, forcing everybody to be better. Yeah, JetBrains tools I have very few complaints on. I used to love ReSharper a lot. I've kind of moved away from it a little bit, but Writer is exceptional. I've got several colleagues, and we have long debates about Writer versus Visual Studio, and Writer has a lot of good stuff going for it. Yeah, Visual Studio is a top tier development tool. Okay, I'm trying to figure out what the heck I did. So run squirrel, because at the end of the day, all I want to do is forward the command line arguments in. Where the heck does this go? Where is the process.start call? Run process. Okay. Okay, so these are all of the calls in here. So for this command line, let me back up and show what this thing is actually doing, and then we'll show what it's supposed to be doing. Let's see. Actually, I wanted to be underneath it. CD squirrel tool. There we are. .NET run. Playlist for music. It is actually from a... really should have a link. These guys here, and I think if you They've got several. Ah! My volume's up too loud on my side. I believe this one is... I have to look, but this is the channel that you would be looking for. They've got a bunch of nice content for streaming. So, and a lot of times when I'm coding, this is I like when I'm trying to focus, having music that doesn't have lyrics or anything to distract me, but it needs to have a good beat for me. So something like this. So I tend to run this thing on repeat, at least for the stream. Sometimes I'll put it on when I'm coding in my day job. Other times I won't. Okay, so this guy here. So when you run help on this squirrel tool, the problem is it's showing out this stuff here. And this isn't what we want it to do at all. We want it to actually like pass the -- help into the other one. And really the reason this is happening is because it's falling into this get default invocation pipeline. And we really don't want any of this. I'm kind of wondering if I should just ditch the invocation or if I should try to hijack the invocation. So the way System Command Line works is actually not too unlike ASP.NET Core. When you on ASP.NET, when you have a HTTP request come in, there's what's called the middleware pipeline that's responsible for receiving that, processing it, doing the routing to figure out which controller method you're going to invoke, all of that processing. And it runs through a pipeline step. Like auth tends to be a step in your pipeline such that you don't have to worry about it, right? By the time it gets to your controller, the auth's been handled for you higher up in the pipeline. System Command Line does the same thing when you invoke on a command. The problem is one of the middleware pipeline things is things like the -- help or -- version. All of those things get pushed higher up. And I'm wondering if what I should do is not any of this stuff. Because in the case of -- help being specified, I'm not going to hit this inner main. It's going to short circuit. The middleware pipeline is going to see that -- help and go, ooh, I know what to do. Let me go through and display the help for you, which most of the time is exactly what you want. And in this case, it's not. It's not. I'm trying to decide whether it's easier because, so options. Okay, so one option is rather than doing invoke, I can just do parse, right? And so this gets me back a parse result. Yeah, I'll do that. And then, oh, I don't have Arnac running. So, that's better. Boom. So that gives me a parse result, and then I can choose to go through and do something with this parse result. I can figure out, what was the command that was invoked? Were there any directives? Are there errors? And I can do all of that stuff. I'm kind of thinking what I'd rather do, though. I kind of like doing it I kind of like still leveraging it, but changing it a little bit. So new command line builder. And I am intentionally using a slightly older C# syntax. Only because that's what this project is currently set to. Forgot you switched stream nights. Welcome, Jared. I even warned you yesterday. I tried to be helpful. So when you do the root command invoke, under the hood, it's going to do something like command builder use defaults. And so the command line builder itself, what this thing does, there's a whole bunch of setup. Again, this is somewhat shamelessly stolen from how ASP.NET does things, where as part of your startup, you go through and tell it what things you're going to be using, like use endpoints, use MVC, use various middleware. So command line builder has various things to say, hey, yeah, I want my command line to support, -- help and do all the stuff for me, and I don't want to think too hard. Just handle that for me. Or I want to have it automatically allow tab completion, so turn on suggestions for me. Or I want to have typo correction, like you saw earlier when I mistyped deployment, and it was helpful and said, hey, let me suggest what you probably meant. Or I want to support -- version. So it has all of these things as available. And when you use default adds in a ton of crap. So it turns on version, help, environment variables, parse directive, suggest. It registers the app with .NET Suggest for tab completion, typo corrections, error reporting, exception handlers, cancellation support. Yeah, so and using this to overload -- help. The problem that I really want to solve is on this tool, when I call -- help, I don't want it to display this CSQ version and whatnot for the squirrel.tool. I want it to ignore all of this, call the other tool, and return its results back to me. Which, that sounds complicated, except the other tool is like the code to invoke the other tool, watch its console output, and report it back here. That's already written. So I don't actually have to build that part. What I really have to do is tell this command line parser, I don't want your middleware. So I think what I want to do is I almost want to copy most of what the use defaults is doing, and then, but not do use defaults. Like, I don't want version, I don't want help, I want to do those myself. The directives I think are fine. Hey, Justin Bieber, welcome. I would, just as a heads up, I have officially switched my streaming night to today. Register with .NET Suggest seems reasonable, though this one's going to be a little weird. Because the command line invocation isn't coming from this tool itself, and it's coming downstream, I don't actually think we want to register it with .NET Suggest. Ugh. That both makes me excited and terrified. Well, it's not going to hurt anything. Yeah, so rather than overloading, I think I'm going to remove some functionality, and I'm probably going to rule my own implementation for most of it, I think. Because at the end of the day, all of this stuff that's being passed, actually, I don't want to do that either. Because by not handling it, it's going to get passed to Squirrel command line. Anything I don't handle gets passed downstream. So it's actually better the less I handle. Environment variable directive. I don't... this is both helpful and terrifying, but I don't think I want that either. Parse directive, I think I want. Man, I don't want suggest. And it feels weird to not have these things, except for I know that this tool is going to invoke another tool that already has those things set up. Parse error reporting. That I want. Exception handling I want. And I want cancellation on key press. So I think I want all of those. Don't you have an overload where you take in a root command? Yeah, there you are. That thing. And then rather than root command invoke, I believe I want to do, it's going to be like builder build invoke or something. Builder build, yeah, that thingy. Invoke async. I think that's what I want. Okay, so let's, proof is in the pudding, run the code. Let me make that a little bigger. So this is both good and bad. It's good in that it actually invoked the inner main method, because before -- help was short-circuiting. Because you'll note I set up the handler to point at the inner main, the main inner method. And then before, with the help directive, System.CommandLine was hijacking the -- help, displaying help, and then just exiting. Which is good. That's kind of what you want. And now it's just complaining that it doesn't find Clowd.Squirrel NuGet package was not found in solution. Well, that's kind of expected because I didn't give you a solution to work with. So I need to look at how this thing is working now, because this guy finds solution directory. Right. So I'm just going to point it at a solution directory where I know this thing exists. So is this expecting a SLN file? Yeah. Oh, interesting. It'll take a directory. So it'll either take a directory or a file. But if it's a directory, it has to be the one. Get full path. Oh, so it ultimately just wants the root directory. Okay. What's the argument here? CSQSLN. Okay, so let's test this a little differently then. So rather than that, I want to do this, but then I want to give it a project that actually has, where's my, no, not app6, Skirday. Because you have Cloud.Squirrel installed. I'm just going to grab you, paste you. That should file does not exist. Oh, interesting. I can't make this a file info because it's willing to take in a directory. So let's do a file system info instead. And then let's turn off, oh, existing only. Oh, that's cool. So file system info is the base class for both file info and directory info. And what's surprising me is that I didn't realize System.CommandLine actually rolled an implementation for that specific class for the existing only. I knew about the directory and the file ones. I didn't realize we did one for the base class. File or directory exists. Cool. Okay, try again. Oh. And then it turns out you have to fix your compilers. Yeah, that should be fine. Okay, once again, rinse, repeat. Oh, it worked. Oh, it worked. I'm so happy. Okay. Oh, this is actually kind of cool. So, you'll note Squirrel Locator CSQ. This is meant to be installed as a .NET global tool. The fact that I'm running from source is kind of an unusual use case, but whatever. And you'll note this output looks very different than what we were just doing above with the Squirrel command line. And the reason is because this is the V2 version of the tool. And Skirriday, the solution that I pointed it at, is referencing the V2 version. So the new CSQ, which is Squirrel Locator, that common squirrel, I don't remember what it stands for. CSQ. So it's a Squirrel Locator. Yeah, see, Squirrel Locator. It found the version I was referencing and then promptly invoked it. Yeah, and I shouldn't say it's referencing V2. It's referencing a version of Cloud.Squirrel that doesn't have my changes in it, because my changes haven't merged. And so the fact that it's displaying this is beautiful. Beautiful, 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 beautiful. Okay, so now the question is, how can I... Let's test a couple more. Because I think if I do something like this, error, command version. Yeah, so this is, and this is one of the reasons for going to System Command Line. This here is mono options, which work. It just, they don't support all what I would call the newer modern CLI features that people want, right? Like the .NET SDK, in my opinion, is a good example of what a modern CLI should do and how it should work. And System Command Line is actually what's powering the .NET SDK. So even though System Command Line is a preview NuGet package, if there's any doubt that Microsoft is backing it, the SDK is built using it. So they've got a vested interest in it doing very well, given that they've just deployed it onto I don't know how many users' machines. Okay, so... Wait, is that all it was going to take? Okay. So the only other thing I would like to do, though, is I would like to have a way to say, I want to actually look at my stuff locally. And I think what I want to do here, is have my own custom directive. So, what do I mean by that? System command line docs. Here. So, System Command Line has their own docs page. Oops. Paste that again, this time without the typo. And they have a feature that has been added. Where is directives? They not cover them in here? I hope they do. Command line syntax, tokens, commands, options, arguments, order, aliases, case sensitivity, -- token, delimiters, arity, overrides, bundling, help, version, response files, directives. Here we go. Okay, so this is something that doesn't exist in a lot of cases. So when building out System Command Line, there was a lot of competing opinions. POSIX being the most popular because that's what Linux, Bash, the vast majority of what people would consider normal command line behavior of what people want. Other competing ones were things like PowerShell, which kind of did its own thing in a lot of different ways. What System Command Line then added into it is this concept of a directive. It's almost like a meta level tag. You could, to liken this back to like the HTTP ASP.NET days, this is almost like your headers in your HTTP request. So they're more meta level stuff. They aren't like part of your body or your URL or your query string or whatnot. So in this case, there's some built-in ones like parse. So if you pass the parse directive, I could tell you or I could just show you. Let's see. If I do this and I do parse. Oh, it didn't I register the parse directive? Oh, I don't have to have it first, do I? Pretty sure I don't. Let me check. It might need to be at the beginning. There we go. It does need to be at the beginning. I wonder if that's called out. When you include parse after the app's name, right? There we go. What this ends up doing is this gives you a representation of how System.CommandLine has parsed the remainder bit of the invocation and how things are getting assigned. So you can see it's figured out, oh, okay, when I parse this, I can see that my CSQ option or my CSQ command has a CSQ SLN option. It's going to be getting the value of, ddev and then everything else is just unmatched tokens. That's the remainder stuff. And the remainder stuff that I didn't match was -- help, which is this type of thing can be very useful for figuring out what's going on. But again, it's kind of that meta level thing. There's also things like the suggest directive, the parse directive. I feel like there was one more that we had in here. Parse error reporting. Yeah. Yeah, I think we might even want to turn the parse directive off on here. So, but what I think I want to do is I think I want to parse this parse result here and go if parse result, let's see, because I can get directives and then I can check if it contains something. So if it contains, and I feel like I want to make my own directive called local. So if it contains local, we're going to do one thing. Else, we're going to do something else, something different. And the else case, I think, is going to be this. And here, if we do local, use defaults. That way, it gives the best of both worlds. I can still forward in the default case, but in the case that I want to use something else, I can do this. I think this works a lot better. And I believe, though, I need to... What is it? Root command. Where do I add directives? I don't remember how to do this. Enable directives. I don't remember how to add my own. Oh, you don't. You just literally reference it. Got it. Perfect. So I don't have to do a darn thing. Okay, so this should then... So now, if I run like this, this should still work and show me the help output of... I didn't have imposter syndrome, but I do now. So pro tip, don't compare yourself to others. I've been doing this for 13 years, and my relaxation activity is programming. So I tend to have a lot of hours of coding. So I usually tell the people on my team that when they leave work at the end of the day, they should go home and do whatever their relaxation activity is, right? Go for a walk, ride a bike, play video games, whatever. Do your relaxation activity. Mine happens to be coding, which really helps in my job because then it means I've spent a ton of hours coding. So I will go home, I'll fire up my own solutions and, do Visual Studio. But it is definitely, when you go home at the end of the day, you should do your relaxation activity. Now, Jared apparently is weird, and his relaxation activity is apparently watching my streams, which that just makes him a little unusual. Hi, Jared. I work with Jared, if that isn't clear. Okay, so if I do square brace local, so without square brace local, I get the help of the squirrel, but if I do square brace local around it, I should now get the help of the CSQ tool. Yes, that's what we want right there. Yes. Oh, System Command Line, you make me so happy some days. There. That way, if I want to be able to get back and get this kind of information, I can do it. I feel like my job is teaching me nothing after watching this. I will say, if you are a solo developer on a project, it can be very difficult to try to learn and do well. Like, even for me, it is hard. It is hard for me when I am on projects by myself, and I've told my boss this before as well, is I actively detest being on a project by myself. I don't care if I'm with an intern or if I'm with another senior engineer or what. I would rather be with somebody else, because there's a certain quality bar that goes up just by knowing that someone else is going to have to at least read my code. Regardless of who it is, just knowing that somebody else is going to read it, you behave a little differently when you know someone else is going to see it. I thought coding a Discord bot was going to be easy until I learned about dependency injection. Oh boy. Yeah, dependency injection is an easy way to jump right off the deep end. Ooh, hold on. Shameless self-promotion time. Let's see. I guess, I don't know why I did this on a separate window. I can do this here. I think I want a graph to show dates with sales along the pricing line. So I go read my charts and build one into a model. It's actually surprising. There's not like a project owner or a project manager driving the feature requests. So I would recommend all three of these. So all of these ones here. For anybody interested in dependency injection, and I will say this. So the first two are all dependency injection and what it is and how to use it. This one here is why to use it. Because if you aren't actually writing tests, dependency injection loses a lot of its goodness. Like, you still get some nice decoupling and that kind of thing, and that is all well and good. But if you're not like trying to write tests, it really loses a lot of the point behind it. And another guys, my direct working on projects, go to direction of advice sometimes. Wow. So when you said you had a lot of freedom, you were not joking. That is a significant amount of freedom. That can be both good or bad. It's definitely a double-edged sword. But yeah, Acid Rain, check out those DI ones. Feel free to drop comments. If people run into concepts or things that you would wish that you would see a stream on, feel free to leave me either comments in the chat here or comment on the video. I keep a running Word document of requests that people have made and try to go to it whenever I am lacking streaming content of what I... Normally my streaming content consists of whatever Kevin wants to do that night. However, sometimes I don't know what I want to do, and so it's like, whatever. I'll start going through requests and whatnot and putting together things. Or if I start seeing similar requests or similar ideas show up in multiple places, those things tend to bump to the top if I know that there's a bunch of people wanting to see a particular thing. Yeah, I can get that. My wife has a similar thing of wanting to make sure if she doesn't understand the why and the big picture of things, it is really hard for her to grasp some concepts. It's great getting stuff done, the client's happy. I will say, in a consulting type gig, that's usually principle number one. I usually tell our new people, if you're getting your work done and the client's happy, you probably aren't doing too bad of a job. Like, there's plenty of room for stuff to go wrong, but generally, if you get those two things, you're at least pointed in the right direction. Yeah, and I will say that the not knowing if you're doing things right is definitely how one of my big things about not liking being on a team in isolation. It's really hard, really hard. Okay, I need to commit this. Let's just check it real quick. So better help output. Fix that so that it actually works appropriately. Add local directive. Fix the type there. No, you're doing it wrong. The documents seem confusing. Yeah. I totally understand that. Let's see here. Forcing CSQ to invoke cool. Okay, so I think system control some user views and find bugs in their system or lack of validation fields that can break the entire production code base. Oh, yeah. Yeah. That's both good and bad. On one hand, you're finding and fixing, which is good. On the other hand, it exists to be found and fixed. On the note of bugs and fixing stuff, I would like to go through and write some tests for this stuff, because this is now the next bit of things that all need to happen. Okay, so the global options I think are already done. Let's see. Help is handled. Cross-plat is handled. Verbose is handled. I'm going to move verbose down just because that's in the same order there. Okay, so this thing previously was writing out this little output of Squirrel for creating and distributing Squirrel releases. I don't think we're doing that anymore, and I'd like to make sure that's still working. CD. Okay. Typing is hard. They wrote in an error exception handler for making sure email was not in use. Yeah. So I won't say who, but there was a client that we were working for at one point in time where they had done. I'm trying to remember. There was something that triggered the need to cause all of the users to reset their passwords on next login, and I don't remember what caused the need for it. But it was they had to change their passwords, and they were increasing the password complexity rules that they had. And again, I don't remember exactly why. But when they implemented the password complexity rules, they only did it in JavaScript. And me, being mildly annoyed, because I use Bitwarden as a password manager, and so whenever anything says generate a password, I click gen new password, copy paste, and that's the end of it. The problem being is sometimes I don't have like use symbols turned on, but it's still generating like a 36 or 40 character random password, so whatever. Length is more important than character sets. And I got flagged for, well, this doesn't meet our complexity requirements. I'm sitting there going, really? Really? A 36 character randomly generated thing, even if it was all lowercase letters, the complexity size of that is huge. Like, it's insane. I was like, this is dumb. And so, me being me, I just went and disabled JavaScript and resubmitted the form, and it went through, and I went, oh no. I was like, well, on one hand, I did update my password, and maybe it's more secure because any attacker is probably not going to attempt passwords that are outside of the requirement set. Maybe. Yeah. Don't worry, that bug has since been fixed. I reported that the next day once I got done laughing because there was no way that should have worked. Okay, so I want to do .NET Run. And I kind of just want to fire it off. I guess I didn't need the dash on the end of that. .NET Run will execute the command all by itself. I just want to see if it actually has this. I don't see the usage anywhere, but I've done so much. Oh, wait. This is the description. I don't know if I like that. I almost want... Yeah, so having it as the description is fine, but I think the goal is to actually have it as part of the output when the command is invoked. Okay, so when this command gets invoked, oh, there is no... That's an interesting problem now. This is something System.CommandLine doesn't do well, because it doesn't have the concept of like a shared method that gets invoked whenever any command is invoked. Like, I could theoretically put it as middleware, but that is technically a behavior change. I'm going to delete this, and we will add it in. I don't know. I'm looking for an internship for the weekends right now where I can broaden my skill set. I don't want to be doing so much front-end work long term. That's good. I highly approve. The only advice I would give you is keep an eye on your mental health and burnout, because though it is good to improve your skill sets, if you burn out, you don't do yourself any good. So there aren't any error cases here, so this to-do is already handled. And actually, so we can actually clean this up. There's a clever trick here. So you can do compound assignment, and actually this isn't even needed here. We can just, the only reason the analyzers can't pick this up is because it doesn't realize that this method has no effect on this. So it's not offering to put them together. But if I were to move this up, then it should know that these things can go together. Come on, figure it out. Okay, or it's going to be dumb, and I'm just going to do it myself. Spend more hours a day with watching than I do working on the project, to be honest. That makes sense. And I will say, I applaud you for knowing that the appropriate thing to do is to actually try to learn how to do it right. Sorry, I missed your comment above it of how fast you were completing tickets. Hired as a junior dev and apparently think creating a view complete with validation and control and data service for pushing influence will take 3 days to make. Yeah, I guess on that one it depends a lot, but yeah, if it's as simple as it sounds, I agree with you. Straight hours. Though I've also had clients that'll say simple sentences like that, and then what they actually want from it is significantly more than that. Okay, I think all this works. Okay, so let's actually write tests on this, because I think that's what I want to do. Is I would like to make sure that when we invoke this thing works appropriately. So, it's the easiest way to go about writing a test against this. Because if I separate this slightly, I can make my life significantly easier. And maybe it's not worth testing the root level stuff and testing just the individual commands inside of it. That's probably better. Let's go that approach. That's probably a much better use of testing time. Okay, so let's do, actually, let's start on the OS X side since we already started there. Do have a very important question. How can I learn to write tests in C# for views? Any shameless plugs here? We have 0 testing software. And I'm losing my test-driven development mindset that I learned in React. Oh, so one, don't lose it. You can keep your test-driven mindset. So couple things that are worth noting. For if you are returning like CSHTML for your MVC views, you generally don't write straight unit tests. You often will write UI tests. I don't think I have any videos on it. Let me look. Playwright, yeah. So this guy here. Yeah, so this would be for doing like front-end UI testing. This would be the library I would point you to. You'll find docs for a lot of older frameworks, like Selenium and similar. Playwright is, I'll say, the new kid on the block, but it is very mature and works really well. I've used it now on multiple projects. It's really nice, and it can, at some point, it can even be stupid easy. They've even got like built-in recorders for your tests. So even if you want to be brain dead and not think about your code, and you just want to click, click, click in the browser and say, yeah, write all that code for me, it'll do it. The one, I will say this, there was a great blog written by Mike on selectors. It wasn't that long ago. Oh, where are you? Search. This one. And I think, I can't remember whether he wrote this in terms of Selenium or whatnot, or whether he was doing this in terms of Playwright. But the concept of still crafting good selectors for your UI tests holds true regardless. Anytime you're doing UI testing in a browser, making sure that you write reliable selectors. Otherwise, every time you even touch your HTML, it breaks your UI tests, and then they become more of a liability than an asset. Like, you only want your UI tests to fail if you've made a UI change that should cause them to fail. If it's like, oh, I made this small tweak and now my UI test that wasn't testing that but just happened to be on the page now breaks, that's kind of a worthless selector one. So at least in terms of testing like your CSHTML views, UI testing for that. The other thing that let me look here real quick. Oh, actually, boy, this is a little old. This is UI testing. It's UI testing, but it's inside of material design, which is WPF, which is probably not overly applicable. If you are, so I will plug this one as well. So this was a talk that I did and this is targeting how to structure your unit test code. There's kind of different, so the short summary is there's sort of different levels of writing your unit test code. You start by, one, making sure that your code is testable. So breaking things apart, DI, loose coupling, all of that fun jazz. That's step one. Step two then is, now that your code is testable with some loose coupling, what do you do for all of those dependencies? You have to put a test double in somehow. And when I teach people, I often make them go through and write the test doubles by hand themselves. Then I'll show them a mocking library like mock or mockq. Then on top of that, I'll say, okay, well, now that you've got mocks, the next piece of coupling is in your unit test, your constructor. Every time you add a parameter to your constructor, you now have to go and edit all of the places where you instantiated that object. If you've got lots of tests, that could be a lot of places. There's a library that I'm a maintainer of called AutoMocker that can then decouple that. And then you go one step further where people go, wait, mocks are great, but mocks are actually not always the best option. And for example, System.CommandLine, they don't use any mocks at all in their tests. Instead, they chose to write their test doubles by hand. But rather than writing a worthless test double, which is most of the time what people end up doing, they actually wrote unit tests against their test double. And so they can then ship that test double inside of the library. So what do I mean by that? So for example, they have an interface, iConsole, right? And as you might expect, it represents a console. So it has things like write line, right, for standard out. And it's got an error property for writing to standard error, that kind of thing. There's two implementations of iConsole inside of System.CommandLine, though. There is System Console, which, as you might expect, just shells out to the system's console, right? But then there's also Memory Console. Where is it? Memory Console. Where is it? In Memory Console? What is the thing called? Blanking on the name. Console. Find it for me, please. Oh, I'm sorry. Test Console. My mistake. Test Console is an in-memory implementation of iConsole that rather than writing out to the real system console, it just goes into string builders. And so you get an in-memory implementation, but there are unit tests that go against both test console and system console to make sure that test console is a good implementation. And at that point, you now have two implementations of all of your dependencies. One that ideally is quick, fast, in memory, or similar, and one that's the real one. But because you have tests asserting that both of those have common behavior, you can swap those now in your tests without the fear that your test double doesn't represent the real thing. Because with mocks, that's always the big risk, is with a mock implementation, you have little to no assertions that your mocks actually match the behavior of the real implementation. So oftentimes people who write tons of tests with mocks, they get done, they're like, look, we have great test coverage. And then there's still bugs in the code. It's like, well, how are there bugs in the code? Oftentimes the bugs creep in where it's like, well, it got past our test because we mocked that dependency in our test. And when we mocked it, it behaved like this, but in reality, it behaves like Y, right? Like those things go, they kind of cause that disjoint. And so that's always the risky point where mocks are great and sometimes they're necessary, especially when it's like, well, I need a mock because I want the dependency to very much behave like X, right? Like in this case, I want to make sure my code works properly when my dependency throws an exception or whatever, right? That, in my opinion, is a useful point for a mock. But for all the other cases where it's like, I just want to plug in a dependency, I want it to be quick and fast, but I also want it to be reflective of the real system. That's where this, having that second implementation, that in-memory one, a simulator, is much better. Now, it's also a bunch more work. I'll say that too. Right. Okay. I cleared out the parse call. I'm just realizing. Sorry. My brain is a little scatterbrained. No, see, I left the parse result in. Oh, but I need the parse result, because I need to be able to do the builder before. Yeah, so this is effectively going to end up parsing this command line twice. I'm okay with that. It's a small performance hit. Whatever. Okay. OSX pack command test. So we are going to write some tests against these commands. So I wrote a couple already to verify that these pack commands behaved as expected, so that I could specify package command welcome, package command license, and that at the end of the day, this thing parsed out appropriately and did the right thing. That's part of, because that, you'll recall on this command, you'll note most of these options, simple, 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 very not simple, very not simple. So I wrote some tests over it. And then the rest of these are fairly simple. Got to get some sleep. I'll be back. Sounds good. Thanks for dropping in. I appreciate it. Okay, so I would like to go through and kind of plug in some tests on the other ones to make sure. I'm trying to decide. I think what I'm trying to decide what is actually valuable testing here. And I think what's valuable testing is around the validation bits on these. Like, I don't think a specific test on the pack authors is that valuable. Maybe a single test that just validates I can specify all options. That's actually, that's probably a valuable one. Okay, so let's start with this. We're gonna convert all you to public. Public. Okay. We're making these things public. They were only protected for dumb reasons, but let's do this first of all. And I'm gonna come in here and make you public too. Okay, now I'm thinking it's probably most valuable to write a test over the validation and a test to make sure that the value is appropriately parsed. And then we call it a day. Okay, so I'm actually going to take you and put you off to the side here where I don't have to think about you for a moment. I kind of want to have you visible. Okay, so I'm going to go up here and I'm going to, let's do this. So, fact, public void, pack ID, and then the validation on this guy. So you know what, here's what we're going to do. We're going to do this, we're going to do this, we're going to go here. Okay, so pack ID, valid, NuGet ID, parses. Boom. And we're going to do that, we're going to do that, we're going to do that. Okay. And then, okay. This blows my mind. This is GitHub Copilot. This auto, like, sure, write the test for me. That's wrong, but it's not that wrong. It's pretty close. Shockingly close. Okay. So we want a valid NuGet ID. So we're just going to go with, actually, you know what we should do? We should just pick on Cloud.Squirrel's current ID. NuGet.org. Cloud.Squirrel. Extra points for spelling. Stop it, stop it, stop it. Okay, so we're just going to pick on this because this is probably the most complicated. Oh, we could even do this. That is potentially the most complicated NuGet ID we can come up with. Okay, so this guy's going to parse. And pack ID parses with both pack ID and you. So that'll be fine. I'm just trying to look because we have other ones that are required, like version and the package directory. So these things we just have to tack on because they're going to be needed. Slap you onto the end. And then we need a package directory for that to exist. So make me a temp directory, please. Thank you. And then we're going to call parse on it. So, oh, this is actually already calling parse. So, kind of like this better. Be a little more explicit. Okay, so parse result there. And then we want to do some asserts on it. So empty air set is good because we're trying to assert that it passes. And then we want assert equal. And so then we want this pack ID here. We expect that to be the value that I get back when I call parse result, get value for option. Let's see, command pack ID. There, run test. Go green, make me happy. Show me green circles. Put you there, I guess. Okay, and test went red. Let's see, package dir must be a non-empty directory. Oh, but the directory I specified was empty. Okay. That'll fix it. So the validation for the package directory is very much being tested. Yay! Green circle. Okay. Let's see. Pack ID with invalid. NuGet ID shows error. And I'm trying to think of what would be a reasonable invalid ID. I'm wondering if just doing that. Let's make it more obvious. 1, 2, 3, 4. And then this guy should show an error. And the error that it should show, I'm gonna go over here, I'm gonna just do this because I don't really want to have, yeah, so I'm guessing you failed on the, oh, that didn't fail. Interesting. So, assert, let's see. Let's go with asserting on one error. I always get a little twitchy about doing that. We're going to do that, and then we're going to do, I think there's a starts with, isn't there on assert? I work with too many testing libraries that I get confused on the assertions available. Okay, and then we don't want this to say that. We want this to say pack ID. Oh no, we want this to say, because this is supposed to show the value. Isn't it an invalid NuGet package ID? Let's see, and so this should actually end up being parse result errors sub 0 dot message, I think. Yeah, okay. Okay, run test. Probably still fails because I sort of thought that this wouldn't work. Expected 1, actual 0. So what constitutes an invalid NuGet ID? Because I didn't actually write this validation. It's all based upon this regular expression. So, oh, so it's really more about if it has invalid characters. Okay, that's pretty generous for a valid ID, but okay. I think NuGet's actually slightly pickier than that. But if I do something like $42 at, that should fail. Now I'm outside of the character set. Oh, but this is now, my assertion's still wrong. And I don't want the opening quote, I don't think. pack ID is an invalid NuGet package ID, and that doesn't look correct. So this validation, it is why we write tests, is using the option name, and I think I actually want it, I don't want it to show, oh, this is supposed to be pack ID. Okay. Okay, sure. We'll go with that. I do want to make sure it does that, and then I want to make sure that it contains I want to make sure that somewhere in this error message it shows the previous one. I think those are the key requirements. We could do an exact string match on the whole thing, but it's like if somebody wants to tweak that slightly, should the test fail? Okay, there, perfect. Okay, let's continue. Version. We're gonna end up doing the same thing here. Some of these are gonna be really fast. Let's see. Version with valid version number passes. Let's see. Pack ID shortens to U. And we're just gonna shorten this to window. Like, here's the thing. Do I really need this? Command with valid. I'm gonna change this. Valid wired arguments. Parses. So here's what we're gonna do. We're gonna just add 2 more assertions here. Call it a day. So I'm intentionally trying to pick things that wouldn't land on defaults, because that would be bad. You don't want to have an accidental pass. So we're gonna do version, and then we're gonna do this is expected to be the pactor dot. Well, that's just straight up supposed to be there. And so this is pack directory. There. That way, if I've got that already written, now I don't need to write this test. Done. With invalid version, shows error. So this will be U, and now I can leverage this as kind of a starting point, right? Of I just realized I actually put a version number string in here. Huh. Interesting. Okay. Let's see. Whatever. This should probably actually be... We should fix that because that's going to confuse me when I look at it later. Let's see. That's why it's so generous on it. And this will be... Oh. We will do that. Let's see. This should be pack version, and let's see, requires semver compliant. Let's just look at what the expected error is. So contains an invalid package version. So this is what we expect to see here, and then we expect to see this value somewhere in it as well. Okay, let's actually click outside of here. I want to run all the tests for this class real quick, just to make sure they all pass. Changed enough stuff. Validate them real quick. I should probably turn on live unit testing. What is it here? Oh, it's doing reference equality on the file infos, and I really don't care. We're going to just compare the full names. If the full names match, here, do that. No propagation. There we go. Test pass, everyone's happy. Okay, so this one here, invalid version, great. We can move on to the next one, directory. Let's see. This is going to be pack directory with empty folder. Shows error. So it's worth noting, in general, when naming unit tests, the three important details are what is being tested, the conditions under which it is being tested, and the expected outcome. If your test name has all of those pieces in it, probably not that bad. Okay. So I want it to be an empty directory, so I do that. And then I look for the error message. Must be a non-empty directory. So I want this here, and I expect this to be pack directory. And then I also expect it to contain the, let's see, pack directory, its full name, somewhere in the message. That should handle that case. Oh, this isn't going to work. That. Try again. Didn't even look at the failure. Probably should have. Yeah, expected one, got two. Pack dir. Oh, so the abbreviation is just dir, not directory. Okay. Test. Here we go. Next up. Let's see. Existing only. Go here. Pack directory. Non-existing. Yeah, so we'll do rather than this, we'll do path.get random file name. Get full path. So get random file name, we'll just get a random full path. And then I think I just make you a string. Don't think too hard about it. From that. Oh, this message is going to be wrong. Ooh, this one's going to be interesting. This one's going to be interesting because the existing only is coming from System.CommandLine. Oh, interesting. Yeah, so it's coming from System.CommandLine, and this actually caught a bug, which is good. It's coming from System.CommandLine and is going to be localized. So I think what I might do here is assert equal parse result errors sub 0. I think it gives me the symbol that failed. Yeah, symbol result dot symbol. So this specifically will be the option, I believe. We'll double check. Let's see. Pack directory. So I won't care as much about the message per se, as long as the message contains the path and that the symbol in question is the pack directory. How far off could it be at that point? Okay. But this thing choked in my code. So we should check that. I wonder if there's a way to short circuit this. Well, so I still have the problem of I can't assume this is used in conjunction. So we're going to do this. We're going to just add an if condition. If directory dot, if the directory doesn't exist, we cannot enumerate it. So we'll just do that. Probably good enough. See, this is why we write tests even on what appears to be really simple code. Let's see. Could not find part of the path. Yeah, it doesn't exist. Oh, that's an and. This should be an or. So if it doesn't exist, or we enumerate and don't find anything. It's kind of the whole point in doing that. There we go. Now it passes. Excellent. That's what we wanted. Thank you. Okay, so there's the pack directory. Next up, come in here. Pack authors. Let's see. These ones I with multiple authors versus value. Let's see here. Kind of wondering if I package up some of this bit. I'm going to package up a little bit of this because I'm going to end up doing the same thing so many times. Let's see, private static void setup required defaults. And this should probably return a string. So how about rather than setup, we'll call get required default options. We'll make you no longer static because I need you to do that. I need you to do this. I'm going to have you do this, this. We can leave a space at the end. And rather than parse, we're just going to return this. That way, I can just call this and reuse this over and over and over. Okay, so now this becomes like this. And actually, let's bring it up. String CLI gets Bing plus boom boom. And now I can just slap in whatever I need to, and then this parse goes down here. That seems a little cleaner. Okay, so this is going to be authors, I think. Is that what it was? Pack authors. Let's see. Me, myself, I. Okay, we'll do that. We're not going to do any errors on it. And I think we can just literally pull the string right back out because I don't think it's fancier than that. Boom, boom, boom. Parse results. Get value for option. And then this goes and pack authors. And that goes like that. We don't need that. Don't need that. Perfect. Test. Do the same thing for title. pack title with title. Realize that's incorrect. Parses value. Pack title. Awesome title. And then this should be my awesome title. Test. Yeah, some of these are going to be very boring. Let's see here. Let's see. Include PDB. Their option sets flag. So this is going to be like this. The PDB like that, and then this should be true, and then this is going to be PDB run. I don't remember why was surprised release notes doesn't have a validator on it. Let me look at the usages of this. Does it assume that it's going to have a valid? Okay, this passes into here, create new spec. Release notes. Yeah, this is going to do a file read all text, so this should very much... Okay, so release notes really should have a validator on it. At least for existing only. So we're going to do release notes, existing only. Boy, that's a little more clear. Let's come in here. Let's see. Release notes with existing file. Parses value. So we're going to go with file info. Release notes. Get. Temp file. Blah, blah, blah. Let's see here. This is going to come in here to be these notes. And we're going to just go with, because in the event that file paths get generated with like spaces or something, we don't want to do anything funky. Do that, do that, do that. These notes, full name, blah, blah, blah. Let's see. And then this should be equal release notes, full name. Get value for option, release notes, full name. Okay. We want one for the error case. Goes, file. What was those errors, what I was using. Those error, so we're going to get rid of bring release notes, get path, get full path, get random file name. Just going to make something up. Drop that. And then we want the error conditions. Yeah, we want to do this because once again, the existing only is very much driven by System command line. I don't want, which is localized. So I don't want to make any assumptions about the message per se. Something like that. As long as it shows unair and the error is tied back to the, oh, this is the wrong one, so that should fail. Betcha that was the failure there. Turn green. No? Let's see. Option 1, release notes. Huh? Expected. I'm just surprised the one earlier worked. Directory info. File info. Wait, so the... Well, that would be a heck of a bug. Is that a... So this one, the pack directory tied back to the correct option. This one tied back to the argument? No. There's no way that's a bug. Can't be the first one. Okay, hang on. I realize it's at the end of my normal streaming time, but if this is a legit bug in System command line, we are taking a small detour while we fix this. Yeah, so I disagree with this assertion. So on options, the actual argument is hidden away from you. And it's shocking to me that in one case it is showing the... In one case it's using the argument. And so specifically for options, it doesn't make sense for it to return out the argument as the symbol because the caller's not going to have access to that. It's hidden from you. So let's jump here and go with existing only. So these two overloads I'm asserting are behaving differently. That's options. Directory exists. So why? I don't understand why one... I do not understand why this would be the case. I don't see where those get set. Because this adds in a validator. We look at the validator's enumeration. Parse error. I mean, this is a little unusual. Okay. Let's do... I mean, I think we just write a test here real quick to verify fact public void foo. All right, we're gonna make sure we can replicate this behavior, because this doesn't seem that hard to do. So we're gonna need a root command. We're gonna need option file info. File option gets new -f. Option directory info. Directory option gets new -d. We add them both in. File option, directory option. Oh, don't do that. Stop it. Stop helping me. Thank you. Okay. And then we want to do root command parse. And both of these, file option existing only. Right? And then we want directory option existing only. And then we want string random path. We're going to do the same thing. Oh, thanks for the follow. I appreciate it. Let's see. So we're going to go with path, get full path, and then path random file name. So mimicking exactly what we did over in the other project. And then we're just going to see if this, what I'm pretty confident is a bug, if it reproduces. I want to know if it reproduces though. Do that. Interpolated string. Random path. Path, and then we're just gonna quote it to make for good measure. Var parse result. Now I just want to look at this guy and see real quick, because I should get 2 parse errors, because we've said one's a file, one's a directory, and we're just feeding a random path that doesn't exist. And if I get 2 different symbol types coming out of this guy, that will be a problem. You still thinking? Okay, there you go. Okay, there's the parse result. Good. Show me your errors. There are 2, which is good. File does not exist, directory doesn't exist. So the file is an argument result. That has an argument symbol. That's an argument symbol as well. Huh. Okay, so that didn't replicate. Which now makes... So this behavior seems correct, but now I'm confused as to how the other one passed. I'm now really confused as to how this passed. Oh, I have a theory. I have a theory that the error isn't... Yeah, it passed because it's not landing on the correct... it's not landing on the correct error. Oh, yeah. See, that's no bueno. Okay, so we're gonna fix this by doing symbol.parents single. So the parent of the argument will be the option. That will fix this test. Then we'll go up and fix the one above. There. So that went green. Thank goodness. This is now wrong. And I need this. So just from a terminology standpoint, it's I'll just call this out. So this is the pack directory, so this -p. So the -p is the option, and the value passed to the option is the option's argument. However, the option's arguments are hidden away from you in the API. Even though they're technically from a language structure perspective, a thing, System.CommandLine hides it away. Okay, so this now fails. Okay, and rightfully so. I'm just surprised that okay, so pack directory. I mean, existing only and must be non-empty are kind of meaningless. Because in order to be non-empty, you have to exist. So maybe this whole... So, okay, so the solution here is just do this. This test is meaningless because in order to... Okay, we can't get to the existing case because non-empty is always going to trigger first. Okay, that's easy. Delete the test. Okay, back down here. Release notes, blah, blah, blah. Okay, where'd we end up? Release notes there. Great. Squirrel aware executable. Let's see. Let's see. I don't want to type that. That's a lot of typing. Squirrel aware executable with file name. Value. There's no validation here. You get rid of that. What is the alias? Main.exe. App.exe. Which then this should be app.exe. Get value for option. Pull the value back out. Away we go. Boom, boom, boom. Boom. And run test. That looks good. Why does this thing not have validation? This thing should have validation. Icon. Existing only. Requires extension. .ico. Alright, something like that. Dice, set up an exe. Great. So keep going real quick. Kind of like to get this. So many. I don't think I'm gonna get through all the tests. This might be my last one. My Mountain Dew is empty and I am fading fast. Icon with file parses value. So what we need is file in. Actually. But I don't actually want that. I need an existing path. So how about get, what is the thing called? Create temp file. Name going to be path change extension. Path get random file name. But I want you to make the extension end in a .ico, please. There. That'll work. And then this is going to be -- icon. File info. Probably do full name there. I mean, the toString will get the right value there, but it's prefer to specify it. Let's see. We want to validate this thing here. Is a file info. Icon. Full name. No prop. Should work. Tests. Boom. 2 more cases to test. Whoop. Deleted a curly brace. Bad. With a file extension. Shows error. We're just going to get rid of the change extension bit, get random file name, boom. Okay, I want one of the error cases, something more like this. We want to come down here. And this should be contains file info. Oh, this is the extension one, so I can actually get the message itself. So we're going to just assert on the message. Requires extension. What is the error message? We can just do the assertion directly on it. Let's see, quote, and close quote, and then this is going to be parse result error sub-0 message. Clear out the rest of that garbage. There, and now we just got to change out these things for what they expect to be. Let's see. I guess I do want an interpolated string, despite not really wanting to, but that's generated, so I kind of have to. Full name for option.name. So this is going to become icon. Does not have on .ico extension. Is what I expect it to be. Test. Ooh, failure. Expected 1, actual 0. Interesting. I'm actually going to do this really quick, just to make sure I'm not getting bit by something weird. Not, or how about wrong? I don't care what it is, it just needs to be a wrong value. Bum, bum, bum. Why is this? This is on icon. Yeah, existing only requires extension. And it got interesting. Why did it not hit this? So debug test. And let's go a spelunking. Why did this not hit this case? Okay, so result tokens 1. Yeah, that looks like kind of what I expected. So if my if condition is backwards. And this is why we write unit tests right here. There we go. So I went through the DI section of your first video, but got lost pretty quickly. I understand the concept of DI, but setting the properties and building into the singleton and trying to relate it to my own project was difficult just based on the difference of the projects. What type of project are you working on? Without file. That's not how you spell without. Let's see, I want path, get full path. Just gonna make this up. Bring file. Working on a Discord bot. Initially, I had the bot responding to name a bot here, but then had to migrate to using / commands. Okay. Gotcha. And I assume is the backend for the bot like a web API C# project? There's no back. Yeah, go ahead. If you don't mind, that would be helpful. Always happy to try and answer questions. Let's see. This is going to be icon. Contains file. Because I'll be honest, I've never actually built a Discord bot. It's one of those things that it's always intrigued me. Yeah, I don't mind. If you watch too many of my streams, you'll note that I do occasionally rabbit trail a lot. It's a bad habit. Let's see here. Oh, this is going to... I need to change the extension of this to be ICO so that it looks right. There we go. There we go. Okay, that cleans that up. Close you, close you. Okay, icon. Let's just keep going. We'll keep going a little longer. A little longer. Ugh. Try to push through. Bundle ID. With ID. Let's see. The code sharing link. Let's take a look. Bot client. Okay. And so we've got Microsoft DI library brought in. Logging service. Initialize async. Set up services. Okay, add singleton, add audio service, add Lava node, build service provider. Okay. That yeah, so this all makes sense. Doing context commands like to make the bot do things. Where is the... I'm missing... there's documentation on creating this as such command really, but it's confusing. Sorry, I was just reading through this. So services... Got it. Okay. So there's a couple things here that might be somewhat tripping you up a little bit. So in general, so most of this setup looks like exactly as I would expect. You've got some sort of initialize that is app startup. So in most apps, you have a main method. But when you're building things like bots or extensions to other apps, oftentimes you're building on top of somebody else's framework. And so the entry point into your code may be multiple points. It may not have a main. But at least in terms of building this out, from what I can see here, this like initialize async is effectively your main in terms of building this out. Given that this is public, I'm assuming that elsewhere in your code, you instantiate one of these things, and then somewhere along the line, either something else invokes your initialize async or you do it directly. And this is effectively your main method or your startup that you have. For DI, generally what you want to do when you do your setup services and build up the service provider, typically you want to avoid passing the service provider off if you can help it. Now, sometimes you can't help it, but things like this command handler, I would actually advocate that what you want to do is rather than passing in these dependencies, so just for terminology purposes, when you have a class's dependencies are its constructor parameters, roughly speaking. There can be other types of dependencies, but for the most part, if you just imagine that if you have a class, whatever its constructor parameters are, those are its dependencies. And the DI container, the iService provider, its responsibility is to provide those dependencies. However, in this case, this command handler, you're instantiating it directly rather than letting the DI container do it for you. So if you were to ever add another constructor parameter to this, and maybe this isn't your class, but either way, you can have the DI container register this stuff up for you. So the the simple solution down here. The Microsoft DI library is built for speed and performance. And so it does lack some features of some of the other DI libraries, but it is still very good. What I would suggest doing it here, I'm going to copy out of here so I can edit. 1 second. I need a VS Code instance, and I don't know. All right, I don't know what project I had loaded last, so I'm just going to move it to the side and get me a clean new window. Yeah, that'll work. Okay, so let's do there. Boom. Okay, and then change language mode, C#. Boom. Okay, cool. So what I would, and again, this is coming from a place of ignorance, not building this, so take everything I'm about to say with a grain of salt. What I would probably do is down here, I would be doing something like add transient, and then I would pass in this command handler here. And so the key part here is with the lifetimes, transient, I'm saying every time I call service provider get service, create a new thing for me. So then here, what I end up doing is then this becomes services get required service. And you'll note this is slightly different than what you use down below. I will explain though in a moment. So when you call get service or get required service, what this ends up doing is telling the service provider, hey, go and call new, invoke that constructor for me, and then look at its constructor parameters, and you please populate all of the constructor parameters for me. So oftentimes what I will tell people is the service provider is almost like your cookbook, and you have to tell it what ingredients it has access to. And so in order to bake a command handler, it's going to have to find each of those constructor parameters and populate them. Now, the get required service is an extension method. So the only difference between get required service and get service is get service can return null. So if you call get service and for whatever reason either a dependency isn't registered or the class itself isn't registered, it goes, I don't know, and just returns null to you. It's like, you asked me to bake a cake, but I don't know what all the ingredients are for a cake, so here's null. Get required service, instead of getting a null, it'll just throw an exception. So if you expect the resolution to succeed, you generally want to use get required service over get service. The other thing, like even on this thing down here, I would potentially be going var lava node. I would limit the number of calls you do to get service or get required service, so that you don't have to do the resolution twice. Because even though in your case this is a singleton where you've given it an instance, there is some amount of overhead for doing this lookup every time. So I would tell you to pull it out, cache it locally, and then go through and do this type of work along here as well. There's one other thing I saw. I don't remember what it was. That may have been it. Oh, this isn't overly critical, but you can go one step further in all of this stuff as well. So, for example, right here, when you instantiate this bot client, you are creating instances of these objects. And I'm guessing based upon your app that the amount of time between this constructor being called and initialize async being called is probably really short. So this probably doesn't matter that much. However, for other stuff, this may matter. So I'm going to say it anyway. Yeah, very short. That's kind of expected. Just looking at this, I would expect that those things are fairly tightly coupled. One thing you can do though is I often decouple the creation of these types of clients and move those down into my setup services. So what I mean is rather than having this client even live out here, so I might I might axe that client altogether, come down here, and intentionally not expose this client outside, because right here, this client is going to end up wanting this type of stuff. So I would end up doing something more like pulling my services out here, and then, and I'm only putting the underscore in so that I can services get required service, right? And then this guy is going to be a Discord socket client. And now the rest, oh, I need to quit. My fingers do Control S a lot. So now inside of here, the very first thing I do on initialize is I create my service provider, and I just trust my service provider to build this up. You can actually go one step further as well. So you can separate this the creation of this, because we don't actually need to instantiate one of these things right away. We don't need to instantiate this Discord socket client until the point that somebody says get required service on it. And again, in your case, that difference is probably, yeah, very short, tiny. Doesn't really matter. But in general, what I will often do is, rather than doing the instantiation outside, you can actually pull it all the way inside. So there is an overload to the various register methods. So add singleton. Interesting code review session. It was interesting to watch. Thanks, Justin Bieber. So rather than instantiating the socket client outside, you can actually do it as part of your registration in here. And what this ends up doing is it defers the creation of this singleton until somebody actually needs it. Now, because it's registered as a singleton, it's only ever going to invoke this callback once. And then all subsequent callbacks will always just get that same instance. But now you've effectively deferred the creation of this and improved your startup minusculely. Now, again, because the difference between having that instantiation occur here versus here is like nothing, whatever, right? It's not going to make a big difference. But as a general pattern, I tend to pull all of my stuff down into the DI registration and try to hide a lot of this kind of information away. That way, if somebody needs access to it, the way the rest of the code gets access to it is they call get required service. Or in better, rather than them needing to know anything about the service provider, what they do instead is they just set their constructor parameters up with what they need. And because I instantiated my class, in this case command handler, from the service provider, it's responsible for populating all of those. So oftentimes, if you can swing it, I try to not let iService provider leak into my constructor parameters if I can help it. It's not always easy. And I think so why command service is manually initialized at the top and then this references that at the bottom. This is the command service being initialized up here. This is the way it was originally written. And I'm only leaving it here for compare and contrast. But this is generally what I would propose as a cleaner solution. So it's only manually initialized at the top because that's how it was originally written. And again, I try to avoid letting iService provider leak into my constructor parameters if I can help it. There is I believe it was in that first dependency injection video. Trying to remember exactly where it was. It could have been in one of the WPF ones. I have one where I show, rather than taking in the dependency directly. So for example, if command handler, for whatever reason, needs to instantiate some other transient type. So let's just imagine for a moment I have a public class foo, right? and public class bar, right? And this guy has a public, well, whatever. We're just going to do this. So in foo, I will have a public void do something method. And so inside of here, instantiate a new bar class. So this is usually the common case that people run into where they quickly run into the question of, well, what do I do in a DI situation? I've got a foo class. Inside of it, I need to instantiate something, but the only thing that knows how to instantiate something is my service provider. And so oftentimes what I see happen is, well, we need to do something like private I service provider, right? And then it ends up with public foo I service provider. I'm writing all this out. This is very much long way. Provider, and then down here now after all of that, now we can finally do provider. Get service bar. Do the stuff, right? This is a lot of work. Hey, good morning, Eternal Wild Fox. Doing this type of thing with a service provider is a lot of work, and now you've leaked in a service provider into foo. Kind of did that and wasn't happy with it. Yeah, and part of the issue is your foo class really only needs a bar. Like, all it really needs is the ability to create a bar, but in order to do that, you ended up service provider. So there's a couple ways people go about doing this. So the generalized pattern is you would do something like public interface iBar factory, and you spell bar correctly, not like how I did it, right? And then, bar create, then public class bar factory I bar factory. So again, this is the long way. I'll show you the short way to cheat this in a minute. Public bar create, but sometimes you end up falling all the way back to this method, so it's worth doing. Return new bar or whatever, right? So maybe take in have factory take in needed dependencies for bar, right? So the factory could have a constructor that takes in dependencies. This is also the way that if you have a class where you have to pass like an int or a string, looking into the using it hints you to make a Discord bot. Yeah, this is the fact that it's a Discord bot is sort of circumstantial. This was just kind of a question on DI, and that was the sample. So then instead of an I service provider, you have an I bar factory. And then down in here, rather than get service, you end up with something that's create. Which this is mildly better. And I will say mildly better because now rather than exposing your entire I service provider down, you've exposed something that's a lot more targeted to what you do. Right, so you get to call the function directly. But writing all of this code just to be able to do a new is kind of a pain in the neck. So this is the generalized pattern. However, there's a shortcut that you can use in a lot of cases. So I'm going to leave this one here as a sample. I'm going to copy this, and we're going to do foo2 here in a minute. Let's do this. We'll do that. Public class foo2. So rather than doing all of that, what this thing really needs is the ability to create a bar. Right? And so what you can do is you can leverage delegates. This will, if you aren't familiar with delegates and lambdas, this will start to look weird fast. So you can do something like this, where you just pass in a func, and you can leverage the type func as your factory, because this is just something built into the base class library, or BCL. And then what it means you do in your DI container is something down here. You would go with add singleton of func of bar, service provider lambda, and then this becomes new bar. And if bar takes any dependencies, you can do sp get service, right? Audio service, right? So now you can set it up this way and just leverage the func delegate type as your factory. And as long as you take the func as your constructor parameter, you now have a generic factory that's controlled by your service provider. So it knows how to instantiate things. And then whenever you need it, and generally you wouldn't register, this would probably be, no, this is, the func is registered as singleton, but it's worth noting the bars that are coming out of it are effectively transient. Because even though the func is a single instance, it's always calling new. Definitely familiar with lambdas. Perfect. So hopefully that helps. So this is oftentimes what I will show people as a shorthand for the factory syntax. Again, factory syntax is the longer form. Sometimes if you need more than one create method because you've got different signatures or different ways you need to create things, or you need to pass a bunch of parameters, this is better, right? If you had to pass like 5 ints in order to create one of these things in addition to DI parameters, yeah, go with the full factory. It makes more sense. But in a lot of cases, a lot of these factory patterns end up looking like this. And if they're going to be this simple, just leverage a func and be done. Let's see. I'm working on a build make like CMake or Premake program. The first version is going to use XML config file to generate Visual Studio project files for languages like C#, C++, and C. Oh, cool. So, Eternal Wild Fox, what is the use case for wanting XML input to be able to generate project files? Like, it's an interesting idea. I'm curious the motivation behind it. One thing I will show real quick. .NET new templates. And thanks for explaining the nuances. Yeah, no problem. Always happy to do so. Where this is not what I'm looking for. There is a this is Donovan's blog. Surprised I don't see a documentation page for it. No, so Wild Fox, your description there just reminded me of the .NET new templates, which oftentimes they are used for generating CSproj files, along with any starting code that you want inside the project file. So again, that was just my question with wondering what the use case was, because there is kind of something there, but I'm also aware that the .NET new templates don't necessarily always have the full breadth of functionality that people are looking for. So I've seen people build all kinds of like templating or bootstrapping type engines effectively to cover certain use cases. I think with that though, I am probably going to sign off for the night because I am getting a little tired. Before I go though, I need to commit my code. I can also generate a scaffolding project. Oh, no problem, Acid Rain. Happy to help. Feel free to drop in anytime. And like I said, if people have questions of topics that you would want covered or things that you think would be interesting. I do keep a running Word document of suggestions that people have had, and we'll often pull from it. Tonight was because I'm trying to get this done in a timely manner. Adding in tests for OSX. How about starting test? I'm typing a comment and it's out of sight. Let's see. Starting tests for OSX. Let's actually be more specific. Pat command. Commit. Yeah, sure, we'll push. Pushing's good. Pushing's good. Cool. Maybe then I'll have some ideas. Sounds good, Aster. And I'm very happy. If you watch any of the recordings of my streams, you'll know that it is not uncommon for me to come into a stream with an idea of what I'm working on and then very quickly rabbit trail based upon questions or suggestions from people. So feel free to drop in anytime. Always love the questions. Always love the interaction. It's much better than when I'm just talking to myself. Yeah, you never need to worry about derailing. That is perfectly acceptable. If it's something where I'm trying to get something done, I'll just tell people, hey, let's cover that next time, or I'll circle back to it later. Other than that, I actually enjoy the rabbit trailing. So, but with that, I'm going to sign off. Tell everyone happy coding. Again, stream time is changed to, back up 3 hours from now, from whatever time zone you're in, every week, at least for the foreseeable future. With that, see everyone next time. Happy coding.